All right, we are here on a auspicious day. I can't think of a better way to spend my birthday than with my good friend Mark covering JFK and all of you.
Happy birthday, Hunley, and all the little Hunleys in Guam and other areas of the world who are just waking up to National Hunley Day. Happy birthday, Eric. Happy birthday.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a lot going on here. For one, we have two different guests. That's unusual. You don't usually have that. We've had it with Jim DiEugenio and Paul Blow, I think, came on together.
Didn't we have Vince Palomaro with some people, or no?
I think he was by himself every time.
Okay.
But we've got two coming today, but there's also some articles that are flying around. George Joannides is coming up in the news again. I don't know where we want to start.
Well, maybe you could just put the article up for it's from Axios. I mean, everybody's kind of posting it. People could see. I think there's some photos in the article itself. The headlines are usually not written by the writers of articles. This is the Axios article. CIA admits officer monitored Oswald before JFK assassination. New records reveal. It's a sketchy headline. The reality of it is they were JM Wave, which was run by George Joannides out of Miami, was involved in infiltrating anti-Castro Cuban groups. It doesn't mean he actually was hiring Oswald. If you look at the last lines of scroll down, by the way, I remember this article. At the very end, it kind of says, no, back up a little bit. CIA to go up a little bit higher. A little bit to come in. No, go up. Let me see. Doesn't have knowledge. Go up a little further. Let me see if it's still there. Might have been another one. Oh no, CIA. Here we go. Go up. Keep going up. Let's see here. Okay, so the reality of it is that the DRE and the other anti-Castro Cuban groups were infiltrated by the CIA out of Miami. This Joannides had an alias. I know that sounds crazy for a CIA agent, but they're making hay out of the fact that he had an alias, and there's a document requesting a phony driver's license, and it's kind of routine. I mean, we saw this a lot with E. Howard Hunt. We saw this with the CIA backgrounds of a number of CIA operatives. There's nothing crazy there. It's kind of like a limited hangout in a way, because the infiltration of the DRE and the other anti-Castro groups were known to JFK researchers for many years. So Joannides, the double job that he's doing is he's called out of retirement to deal as the liaison between the CIA and the House Select Committee on the assassination of JFK and Martin Luther King. So of course he is acting on behalf of the CIA. No shit, Sherlock. And he stonewalls them and fucks with them and does things to them. To me, this is not news. We've known this for decades and decades and decades. These articles show that the new articles show that he had another identity. Okay, that's not so exciting. But Oswald did interface with the DRE, with Carlos Bringuier. He was on a WDSU debate on radio with Bringuier, and he did mix it up with them in the streets. So it's kind of like guilt by association with Joannides and the DRE infiltrating and also interacting with Oswald. And in the article, it says this does not mean that they were involved in hiring Oswald or even using him for the assassination. And they also say there's no connection yet between Joannides and the assassination itself, which I believe is true. I think these are two separate events. These articles do show a connection between the DRE being infiltrated and Oswald. But what I'm getting at is we already kind of knew these things. This is not earth-shattering news. Axios, trying to get some clicks, thinks it is, and some other outlets do as well. But if you could put that back up for 1 second, I just want to see something.
I had the author up to talk, but here we go.
Okay. Scroll down a little bit here. Just want to see something here. The linchpin, the memo, Joni was directed to Lee. Okay, becomes Howard Gebler. There really was a Howard Gebler, by the way, and he looks exactly like him. So that's kind of weird. Until Thursday, the agency denied Joanides was known as Howard. Okay, big deal. The case officer named for the CIA contact to work with activists with the Cuban Student Directorate. For decades, the agency also falsely said it had nothing to do with the student group. Okay, so they obviously don't want to let that out for whatever reason. But again, it's not that big of a deal. Little was known of Joanides' involvement in the case until disclosures in 1998. Okay, scroll down a tiny bit more here. Zoom in. Joanides was the deputy chief of the CIA's Miami branch, right? August 9th, 1963, more than 3 months after the assassination, 4 DRE operatives got into a scuffle 3 months before with Oswald in New Orleans. That's what I was referring to. He was passing out pro-Castro leaflets. Oswald debated DRE activists, like I said, on TV, local TV. After the assassination, DRE's newsletter identified Oswald as pro-Castro communist. I don't know what Operation Northwoods has to do with it. The new here's a zoom out. Yeah, the new documents don't shed any additional light on Kennedy's shooting or settle the controversy over Oswald acted alone, nor is there any evidence showing why the CIA covered up Joanides' ties to DRE. That's the point I was trying to make. It's one of these things where to me, it's obvious, and it's stuff that we've known for a long time. That's all I'm trying to say. So I don't see this as earth-shattering news. Does it help? Absolutely. Joanides was given a medal by the CIA, but his job was to cover their tracks for various different things, not related essentially to the assassination. However, it does add a little bit more onto the fire of their connection to Lee Harvey Oswald as an agency, Eric. You know, I mean, it does add to that world.
Sure. I mean, especially when they're denying it and the names come up. I mean,
yeah. Now, Morley's been after this guy for a long time, Joanides.
Yeah, he wrote a book on him, didn't he? Our Man in Mexico, or it's like.
Well, no, that's about the Win Scott down in Mexico. But the Joanides white whale, I don't think it's going to lead to a direct connection to Oswald, but the DRE and the creation of this pro-Castro Oswald interacting with them, they're obviously using Oswald as bait for these different groups and to flesh out moles and to see what's going on. He's clearly an intelligence operative. I mean, I don't think anybody disputes that even anymore, including, well, maybe not Posner. He probably still disputes it. Although I did see Posner communicating to Morley saying, great find. So Posner is even excited about the Joanides find for reasons I don't understand. But I guess for more disclosure, he said this is helpful in the grand scheme of things, Gerald Posner, of Case Closed, the famous lone nut manual.
All right, we got a chatter. Ron Johnson griping in the chat. I guess it's not meeting his satisfaction, and I'd recommend Ron just go on. There's lots of channels out there.
Yeah,
go check
that's cool.
Something else out.
That's cool, bro.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Sorry we bothered you with such trivial breaking news. And even in the article by Axios, it thanks the Trump administration for releasing these things, and that more is coming down the pike by the new director of DNI, who is releasing these things. It's kind of, I mean, think about the difference between the 4 years before and the 4 months that have just happened. I mean, in terms of JFK, how much momentum there is. I know people are pretty cynical about this subject matter, but the reality of it is there was nothing happening. There were people suing the previous administration from the Kennedy research community. And now it's almost like everyone's combing for documents to try to find it under Ratcliffe and others. And I don't want to give it away, but they're claiming that they're looking for somebody named William King Harvey's travel records on November 22nd, 1963, which people have batted around for a number of years as to whether he was in Rome or not. And they're also looking for travel records in the CIA archives of various people, including Hunt, including David Atlee Phillips, and including some of the other people who are figured prominently. If they're still there and these come out, that would be exciting.
Well, I mean, there's so many files. I mean, getting through them and finding the right things and then knowing how to line them up is quite a
the Joe and Edie's
task.
files. There's quite a few in the Joe and Edie's thing. I thumbed through it. You can find them at Mary Farrell's website. Morley has put them all together in a neat little package, which is commendable. So if you want to go through the Joe and Edie's thing again, I don't, see the mega importance of Joe and Edie's. He's never been even hinted at being involved in the assassination or surrounding it, and he was involved with JM Wave. The reason I'm mentioning this a few times is amateur researchers tend to conflate these two things. There was incredible CIA anti-Castro activity out of Miami, that it's separate from the assassination. There are overlaps because of the people involved. But finding something in the anti-Castro CIA involvement doesn't necessarily mean it's part of the JFK assassination research. I'll just put it out as broadly as possible in that regard, if that helps anybody.
Well, we had issues with Cuba. I mean, Operation Northwoods, a few other things, Bay of Pigs. I mean, they were kind of front of mind for quite a while.
And, and it may have been motivation, for the assassination, as we've discussed previously. But as of yet, we have not seen any direct connection to JM Wave, the Bay of Pigs, and the assassination. So in terms of documentation, that is.
But maybe more is coming out. So
maybe more is coming out. I mean, Operation Northwoods was really a document to do a false flag to invade the island of Cuba. Again, this is not involved in the assassination, but tangentially, people cite it as, if they did that, then they must have done this. And that's a bridge too far for me personally as a researcher.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, we have the guests that are going to be coming on today. So I'm going to try to, there's 3 super chats. I'm going to run them through, try to run through things where we can.
Okay.
It may be difficult to keep up, but Pam, as usual, super supportive. Thank you so much. Also supportive on X. Happy Tuesday to you as well, Pam. Thank you. And we have Fletcher Boy wishing me happy birthday. Thank you, Fletcher Boy. I can always appreciate that. And happy birthday from Dr. Evil 814. Happy birthday, Eric. On the Epstein thing, don't you think the deep state would have hoovered up all the evidence long ago and replaced it? Not really sure. We'll probably talk about Epstein on Friday. Right, I don't anticipate it today. We'll stick with one conspiracy.
We got to cover these things today because of the breaking news. And I don't know what happened to the Luna Committee. It kind of disappeared. We'll talk with our next guest, who was involved with the original House Select Committee on Assassination. Select Committee meaning it's not a standing committee. It's got to be reestablished every single term, every 2 years. I think it was reestablished each year for 2 years, but the guest will explain that more in detail. And
both guests were involved with that committee.
Yeah, both guests are involved in that original 1977 House Select Committee on Assassinations. And there's a lot of meat on that bone. The deputy investigator was Robert Tanenbaum, and he served under Richard Sprague, who was an assistant DA out of Philadelphia. And Robert T will explain that. Robert T, and then we have Robert G. So we have 2 Roberts, one Tanenbaum, one Groden. Both of them work together on the House Assassinations Committee. And this is a picture of Richard Sprague, which we'll get into when our guest gets here. But let me just read
Looks tired.
He lifts a heavy load to carry on Robert Tanenbaum. Let me just read who Robert Tanenbaum is, because I have a lot of interesting questions for him. Robert Tanenbaum is the author of 33 books, 29 novels, 4 nonfiction books. He's one of the most successful prosecuting attorneys, having never lost a felony trial and convicting hundreds of violent criminals. He was assistant district attorney in New York County in the office of legendary district attorney Frank Hogan, where he ran the Homicide Bureau, served as the chief of the criminal courts, and was in charge of the DA's legal staff training program. He served as, this is what I was referring to, he served as Deputy Chief Counsel for the Congressional Committee investigation into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Tanenbaum also served 2 terms as mayor of Beverly Hills and taught advanced criminal procedure at Boldhall School of Law, University of California, Berkeley. He attended the University of California at Berkeley on a basketball scholarship where he earned a BA and received his law degree from UC Berkeley Boldhall School of Law. This book has just come out, which is the reason we're having him on. This book here, which is called That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK, is a brand new book. Robert Tanenbaum, and Robert Groden will both be with us in Dallas. Not with us, but Robert Tanenbaum will be there, I think, because of the book. And Bob Groden will be there with us in Dallas, November 22nd for the Lancer conference, Eric. This is my favorite Tanenbaum book. This is one of the only novels that I have, which is Corruption of Blood, which is a novelesque version of what he describes in the assassination lore. This is probably one of the closest ones among his novels, Corruption of Blood. But we'll get into that with him when he comes on the scene here. This is where we're going to be. Now, let's see here. Larry Hancock, Groden's going to be there. Hunley hopefully will be there. As I said, Robert Tanenbaum will be there from what I just recently heard. This is going to be a fantastic series of seminars. You can use the Untold 10 or that squiggly code, right?
Well, you use both, actually. You scan that. There's an updated list here.
Oh, you have another list.
I'll go back to the original poster, but
okay,
because there's some more names here. Jeff Meek is on this one.
Let me see this. Let me see.
Let me zoom in here. Oh, there we go.
Oh yeah, there is Robert Tanenbaum. Okay, there's us. There's Matt, who's an expert. Apparently, Janet Groden. Apparently, her area of expertise is the Tippit killing. And yeah. His wife, Bob's wife. More speakers to be announced soon. Yeah, November 21st to the 23rd. She added the niece of Bannister. You know what I mean? Bannister.
Guy Bannister?
Guy Bannister's niece has been added to the speaker list. I don't know what she has, but apparently has some access to stuff about her uncle.
Well, if he saved files or had files at home, then yeah, that could be great.
I don't know if
anyway,
he had
there's
files. Okay, so yeah, use Untold 10 or the squiggly thing there to find out how to get tickets. I think it's at the Fairmont Hotel this year, which has a block discount also of rooms that you could get at the Fairmont.
Right. I think after you get your ticket, they'll probably send you a hotel discount. But when you're signing up, you can use the QR code on the bottom right there. Use your phone pointing at your TV, whatever you're doing. Or there's a link down in the description. You can click on that and then please use Untold 10. Very important, so that way we get credit for what's going on. And it looks like we have 2 guests in the background already.
Oh, great. I'm glad. I'm glad. Well, if Robert T is here, maybe we could bring in Robert T, and then we'll save Robert G until later in the hour.
Think this is Robert T. It's hard for me to tell from my screen, but
well, let's take a chance. We'll take a shot here.
There he is.
Hey, that looks like Robert T.
That does look like him. How are you doing, sir?
All's well.
Welcome to our show. We haven't had you as a guest before, but Groden has been a guest on a number of times. I have been following your career for a long time, Robert, and I'm a big fan.
Well, thank you very much.
No, I'm serious.
When someone says they've been following me, you got to think about hold it on.
No. First of all,
time yet, that's sort of thing. But anyway,
wait, I'm a Brooklyn Jew. I'm a Brooklyn Jew from. Thank you. I'm a Brooklyn Jew from Coney Island. I remember Hogan very well. My grandfather was campaign manager to a one-term independent mayor named Impellitteri. I don't know if you remember him from 1952-ish.
And believe me, he was an extraordinary person, Hogan.
Yeah. How long, Robert, Bob, how long was he in it? It seems like 30 or 25 years. It seemed like a generation.
Very good. Well, he started in the mid-30s with Tom Dewey.
Right.
Mr. Republican.
Right.
And Dewey was appointed by the judge who wanted to make sure that this would be a fair investigation. It wouldn't be political. So that's why Dewey gets appointed to chair this investigation into corruption in the justice system in Manhattan. So, of course, of the 5 boroughs, Manhattan is always the most glamorous. I grew up in Brooklyn. And, if you said you were going to Manhattan, you would say we're going to the city.
That
was the difference between all the other boroughs. And Hogan was a legend. He started with Dewey. Dewey then became DA. Dewey was a special prosecutor to deal with corruption in the system. Hogan was in Wall Street. He left his firm and went to work with Dewey. And he became a legend because what he did was he took what was the best of Dewey, that is the objectivity of the investigation. This wasn't a Republican versus a Democrat kind of thing. And that's what was so important about the appointment of Dewey. Dewey was one can disagree with him on many different areas, but he was committed to telling the truth about what happened here. And that truth came down the pike so many different ways that Dewey has always been vindicated for it. Because keep in mind, Dewey became the DA in like 39. And in 42, Hogan was still working with him. In 42, Hogan took over because Dewey then ran for president, as you may recall.
Right.
In the famous one, of course, was the 48 with Truman.
Yeah.
So then, that was a shoo-in for Dewey, but it didn't turn out that way. And Hogan, meanwhile, stayed on from 42 until 74 with all 4-party endorsement. And I worked with him when I got out of law school in 69. And he was greater than legend. He was for real.
Oh, yeah.
And whatever happened with respect to anything, he wanted to know the evidence in the case. He wasn't interested in politics. He was never going to run for any other office, et cetera, et cetera. So he always had 4-party endorsement. He was a lifelong Democrat, and he had Republican, liberal, and conservative party support as well for all those years. And he played it perfect. I mean, there was never any indication about was it politically wise to do anything in the office. The question is, do we have the evidence? And if there's evidence, we're not interested in who the defendant might be. That's what Hogan was all about. And he was an extraordinary person. People thought I was close to him only because I worked 24/7. This is what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
And people, believed I was his stepchild, which I got a kick out of and cherished because he was extraordinary in life. He was everything you think you want to have from a special prosecutor of any kind. There were no favorites played. And that's what was so beautiful about the office when he ran it. And a lot of good people came in and out. So, it was a real training ground for trial practice. Most of the people shook his hand for 4 years as the commitment. My commitment to him, because of issues that I raise in my book, was for life. As long as he was going to be there, I want to serve.
How long did you serve?
Well, I started in '68 and stayed on until the end of the '70s.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
So it was.
Did you serve with Q? Who was the guy afterwards? I think it was after him was Q.
Morgenthau came in.
Oh, right.
Yeah, merry men became political about it. They had no experience in the justice system. It was strictly a real plum to have.
Yeah.
And it was I was in charge of a lot of different things during that period of time. And I testified before the Assassination Record Review Board that was formed in '93 because of the work that was done in '92. The JFK Records Act was passed. But the seriousness of it can't be overstated because of all of the information that was uncovered about what really happened to JFK.
Well, just go back for a second because I remember them. This is just my own knowledge. I remember you being played by James Woods in a movie years ago with Yaphet Kotto, Bob. And I thought James Woods kind of nailed you in that Badger the Assassin. How did that come about?
Well, there were always people who wanted to do a film about Hogan and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But it was a very difficult thing to do because there was no politics involved with him. And the question was, what is the evidence, as he always said?
Right.
Show me the evidence, and if it's persuasive, we will act on it. But we're not getting involved in any kind of political activity at all, ever.
Well, go ahead. Tell us the politics of the Badger the Assassin, because that was an assassination, it seemed, of these two cops up in Harlem, if I remember correctly.
That's exactly right. Those Waverly Jones and Joseph P. Argentini were the two police officers.
And Waverly Jones was African American, and the other one was Italian, right? And
there were two young police officers. Waverly Jones, I think, was 32, and 28. Jones and Piacentini was 28. He had one or two children at the time who were just 1 or 2 years old,
right?
And he begged the killers not to kill him.
These were BLA political assassins, right, Robert?
Black Liberation Army. That was the so-called Liberation Army,
right?
And they were going around the country executing police,
right?
And it was execution of police, not with anything they had done to each other,
right?
Just because they wore blue.
Right.
They were going to be assassinated by this group, and they did it.
How many? Tell the audience how many shots they put into the cops.
12 shots. There were 12 shots put into Piacentini, 4 shots in the back of the head to Jones.
Right.
Jones went right down. They saw that they were at a housing project, responding to a housing issue amongst the tenants, and when they exited the building, the killers followed in step, and one of the shooters shot 4 times, Jones 4 times in the back of the head, and he went smashing down to the ground. And then they put 22 bullet holes, and using Piacentini's own weapon.
The reason I mentioned the 22 bullet holes is because there was really no song by Bruce Springsteen about this assassination, was there, Bob?
I'm sorry, there was no what?
There was no song by Bruce Springsteen about this event, was there?
Oh, if it were, it passed me by.
Yeah, no.
To me, all this was part of something I wanted to do personally, to be involved, to spend my life involved in dealing with this kind of tragedy and bringing to justice those people who committed it.
Right.
And that's all in my book. My book about the case, and I try
It's also covered in the movie, which is not so bad, with Pam Grier and some other good actors and actresses in the film.
Pam Grier was terrific. Jimmy Woods was great.
He was great. He was absolutely
he was
great.
terrific. Yeah, Jimmy Woods was pure Jimmy Woods. And as a matter of fact, at a dinner we had with the whole cast, his mom came over to me and said, "This is the only part I really enjoyed Jimmy playing you instead of all these other creeps. He's great, a great actor, a real character, very smart guy
in the Onion Fields. Oh yeah, I've met him a couple of times with Oliver.
Very, very, very talented person.
Yeah.
So all that, and Lou Stokes was the chairman of the committee.
Right.
And Lou was a very good guy. I mean, he was just beaten down by members of the committee once they realized that this thing was for real and that we had uncovered some very, very important evidence.
Now, this is the brother of Carl Stokes, I think, who was
That's
the mayor.
exactly right. Carl Stokes was the chairman of our committee.
Right. Okay. And Louis
I always
Stokes.
had the utmost respect for Carl. I'm sorry, Carl was his brother. This is
The
Lou
mayor
Stokes.
of Detroit was Carl Stokes, right?
That's exactly right. Carl
Okay.
Stokes. And Lou, he wanted Lou to run for a federal seat so that they can have more influence and have the budget for good things,
Right.
to deal with education, to deal with all various kinds of things that, we want from our politicians. And that's how it all came down. So Lou Stokes and I became lifelong friends. We disagreed about how we should proceed by far because he believed that the rest of the committee, as he referred to them, were not going to deal with me any longer because they didn't want to tell the truth about what happened, is the bottom line.
Right.
And I had this conversation with Lou, and I said, "Lou, I'm having a tough time with some of the members of the committee because some of the members of the committee, the Congress people, would get up before the hearing would start, of which I was in charge, and they would say, before Mr. Tanenbaum runs the hearing, we want to just say that we're very, very sure that everyone in the government has cooperated with us." Well, that was the last thing that they did.
Right.
And then I would get up and I said, "It's nice to hear from Congressman whoever made the comments at the time," and it just wasn't one. And I said, "I don't know what, these people are very busy. They have bells ringing in their office all day. And how they respond to it is a miracle." I said, "But the last thing that I would say a person in charge of this investigation would be that there was a cooperation. There was no cooperation. And I'll explain why and what happened."
Well, let's go back for 1 second. I just want to get back, go into your past a little bit more before we jump to this thing with Robert. How do you end up to be the mayor of Beverly Hills, Bob?
Well,
I mean, that's something on your resume that seems a little unusual for a regular guy from Brooklyn.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I think the years of Brooklyn, my first 12 years, excuse me, were in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
What a training ground. If you want to have a training ground about right and wrong and the welfare of people in general.
Yeah.
And I was blessed with that because of the people who I was involved with. And my mother was a school teacher. She was very much
They were first generation Americans, Bob?
They were first generation, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And
there's some good stuff in the book about your family and your interaction with your mother, and really profound stuff in the book.
Yeah, exactly. No, I go through that because I wanted the reader of the book, and when I talk about it, obviously, is that Oswald did not kill the president. Right. And in order for people to understand where I'm coming from, a totally apolitical area, just what the evidence was, and the existing evidence, I wanted them to know who I was so that they could, say, "Oh, this guy's a nut, get him out of here," or "This makes a lot of sense." And so the nature of the book was that the evidence in the case was overwhelming that Oswald did not kill the president. I'll go through that with you, and however you want.
You're coming at that as a prosecutor, right? Which was, I think, significant.
Well, absolutely. There is no way Lee Harvey Oswald would have been convicted in any courtroom in America, in my judgment. And I have tried more cases than any other prosecutor save Richard Sprague, who was the chief assistant DA in Philadelphia, who worked with me and asked me to get involved. That's how it started for me. I didn't apply for this job to be in charge of the investigation into the assassination of President Kennedy. That's not what happened.
Did Sprague call you up out of the blue, Bob? I mean, you didn't even know Sprague, did you?
I did not know Dick Sprague. Because when I was in the DA's office, I was in charge of the incoming caseload. I was in charge of what they call the Criminal Court Bureau, as well as the Homicide Bureau, because I wanted to still try murder cases.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to get swallowed up in any of this other material that was going on, obviously, and you just can't do too many things. But I was permitted to do this, to have my own caseload of major murder cases, and at the same time work with the investigation. And the investigation was a shocking revelation about who was involved in all this.
Well, give us a little background on Sprague, because I know that he was involved in the Tony Boyle case out of Philadelphia.
That was his main claim to fame. He was on that case. He was a chief assistant DA in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And thank you for mentioning him. He was invaluable in this whole story, because he became chief counsel and staff director.
Well, tell the audience that may not know about the Tony Boyle case.
Yeah, that's what happened. And what happened was in 76, in October, he called me up. He now had finished the 6 years of the Boyle case.
Yeah.
The Boyle case was an amazing.
That was a mob rub out of the Union chief, Tony Boyle.
Tony.
Outside of Pittsburgh, was it, Bob? Or I forget where it was.
No, they were very much involved in Pittsburgh, et cetera, et cetera. But what happened was,
United Mine Workers, I think it was.
The United Mine Workers of America was the largest union at the time.
Yeah.
And Boyle was the corrupt president assassin.
He was
and
the Jimmy Hoffa.
Yablonsky, who had been with the union with him for about 30 years. Yablonsky saw the horrors of what were happening and turned straight. And there was an open hit contract, as they talk about it in that business, to kill Yablonsky. Which they did. They went up into his house. The three killers went up into his home outside of Pittsburgh, and they murdered his wife. It was 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Murdered his wife, his daughter, and they blew him away.
Yeah.
And that was how the investigation started into this whole thing, because Sprague was an incredible person, high integrity, brilliant person. And out of the clear blue, when he finished the investigation, it took him 6 trials, because one of the cases, the case against Boyle, the major case against Tony Boyle, Tough Tony Boyle, as you may recall.
Tough Tony. Yeah,
Tough Tony.
Right.
That case was, he convicted the players, basically, who were involved in this case up through 74. And then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court reversed the Boyle case. And then I was with Dick. I started with Dick in January of 77. We went to Washington together to conduct the investigation. And then he told me about what happened with the case. And he wanted me to try the retrial.
Oh, really? He was Pennsylvania? It was a Pennsylvania case.
Yeah. He was so burnt out from all the work he had done in that case. He conducted 6 trials, and I said to him, I'll sit in court with you. I'll do anything you want. But I don't think I should try this case, because it's your case. You and Boyle now have to go head to head. That case was improperly reversed, totally improperly reversed. It was all politics. And so he tried him in 78 and convicted him. And that ended his involvement, because he was mostly staying in Philadelphia when we were working together. Right. And it was really total burnout for the things that he has done and was called upon to do. And that was the right thing. That's all he would ever do. And I tell you, a brilliant trial lawyer, second to none.
A lot of Pennsylvania stuff in this. I mean, you also interact with Senator Richard Schweiker from Pennsylvania.
That's probably the beginning of my story here.
Yeah.
Was with Senator Schweiker, Republican, and Schweiker was part of the church committee. That is the federal member of the world. So when I say church, I'm not referring to
Frank Church Committee investigating CIA misadventures around the globe, and Schweiker was part of that.
Schweiker was an important part of that because he was in charge of the subcommittee.
Yeah.
That looked into the effect that the assassinations had and may have had on the executive intelligence agencies. And that's how I run into him, because he calls me up when I go to Washington with Dick Sprague.
Well, he famously said that Oswald had the fingerprints of intelligence all over him, which was a quote that survived to this day. But he also gave you a secret file, from what I understand, which was his file, I guess, right, Bob?
That's exactly what happened. He called me up the first week we were in D.C., and Dick, because of the burnout issue, was incredible. He wanted me to take over, and I did, but I wanted to tell him I will not do anything without your approval. This is not my committee or your committee. It's a congressional committee. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to be the sole person out there doing things on my own. I'm going to tell you everything that happens every day, which I did. Yeah. And he was totally supportive. He was an amazing person.
This is Sprague. This is Dick Sprague.
Richard A. Sprague. And so he was the chief assistant DA in the DA's office. And then he left the office to take over this new job, which was chief counsel and staff director of the Assassinations Committee. And I was in charge of, we were on Schweiker. Schweiker was in charge of the federal investigation portion of what was really involved here. And he called me up the first week I was there, and he gave me his file, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm very, very, heartbroken about what happened here, to the extent that I never dreamed any of these facts would be true. And I was there, sitting on his club chair, listening to every word he said. I wasn't taking notes. And he said, I was quiet. And he said, first, here are my notes on the investigation. The second thing I have to tell you is heartbreaking. From the investigation, he said, not from anyone's opinion, right, but from hardcore facts, I have to inform you that the facts tell us that the assassination was called by members of the CIA.
Wow.
They participated in this assassination.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it was like 10 buckets of water were poured on my head. I never went, I knew nothing about the evidence in this whole thing.
At this time.
We didn't go down there with a brief.
Yeah.
We went down there, as we said to the committee, before we took the job, when it was offered. Sprague offered it to me to be his chief assistant, and the committee hired him to be chief counsel.
Right.
And he accepted. I accepted after we met and talked. So the part about all this is that when I became head of the subcommittee, and Schweiker gave me this material, and his knowledge of what happened interfered with our investigation. We didn't say, okay, Senator Schweiker was a very, very moderate Republican. He was an accepted person in the whole world of trying to be objective. He wasn't looking for a new kind of life to have. Now I'm the person who, determined whether or not who killed the president, et cetera, et cetera. That was not him at all.
Well, was
to the contrary. He was stunned by this. And that's why what he said was so important.
Did you have any preconceived notions when you came down from New York?
No. When we went to Washington, when Dick and I went to Washington, we made it very clear that we're not taking any brief with us down there. That is to say, we made it clear to the committee, because it was not our investigation to the extent that we had the authority to do A, B, and C. We wanted the authority to do that. They gave that to us. But at the same time, if they felt we were doing things they didn't like, these are the committee members, then they would get rid of us. And in fact, what happened was the way they conducted themselves, they didn't realize it. I mean, they may have realized it, obviously, because we were getting so close to everything that was really true, that they relished the notion that we would leave because of their interference. Sure. They promised they would not interfere, and that's exactly, within 4 months later, they indicated how deeply involved they wanted to get. And that's what happened before these meetings that I had with the committee that I conducted with their consent. And it was shocking. The whole thing was shocking to me. And one of the most important shocking things to me was what the evidence is overwhelming here. It's not my opinion.
Right.
So when I say, and people say, thank you for doing your job, there's no need to thank me. I'm just anyone could have done this who had background in this kind of work. And because the evidence was all there on a silver platter. And I remember telling that to Lou Stokes. When Lou told me the rest of the committee didn't really want to go forward with anymore, I said, well, why you hire us? Sprague and I made it very clear that if there was any interference, we would leave. And he said that the committee, Bob, did not, and we had a good relationship, believe me. This wasn't a me and him thing. And we became friendly for years thereafter. And Lou said, Bob, it's the majority of the committee is not going to support your subpoena request. What was my subpoena request? Or any other request? My subpoena request was that Sprague and I had information that the Stokes' people on the committee and those who were involved in the JFK Records Review Act of 1992 and the Assassination Record Review Board of 93, sometime later, obviously, that the bottom line to this whole case was that the CIA ran the investigation to murder the president.
Well, isn't it
the
a fact
evidence
that
I
you
wanted
found...
from Lou Stokes?
Go ahead. No, I was just wondering, one of the things you uncovered was an actual document that the CIA was monitoring Jim Garrison's case, right, Bob?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
and the CIA,
as an example of what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. But even more so, I'll get to in a moment, is the John McCone letter of March 3rd, 64, he was then head of the CIA. And he became head of the CIA when Kennedy fired Allen Dulles because of the Bay of Pigs fiasco. And that's all very much involved in the whole story with him and Bobby Kennedy, his brother, JFK and his brother. Because Kennedy was informed that when Nixon approved in 59, before JFK became president, because everybody knew Nixon was going to, win that election. We've lived through that already several times.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, just about the Bay of Pigs for 1 second, Bob. Did you actually see the training films of Cuban exiles down in Louisiana? I remember vaguely remembering this from many years ago, you discussing this, and somehow you found this somewhere in a library in Georgetown or something.
Excellent memory on your part.
That's all I do. I have memories that do me no good.
Two of the researchers in the case, there are a lot of good people who worked on the committee. Two of the researchers on the case came to the library, as you just mentioned,
Georgetown,
and they it was 16 millimeter, 18 millimeter, 18 millimeter. Not one of my strengths, knowing about the film.
Well, the next guest has some strengths in that area. Yeah,
none of my trials are on film. I tell you that.
No, the next guy will talk about that. But go on.
Yeah. Anyway, the issue of how we moved forward, given the nature of what Schweiker had learned. That's where we were.
Yeah.
Schweiker called, and tells me basically it's the CIA. And I was stunned, but we didn't come in now with a preconceived notion that we're going to get the CIA. That's not what happened at all. It was to the contrary. Where the evidence took us is where we were going. And that's important for everybody to understand. It's not as though Sprague was looking to make a case against anyone, nor was I.
Right.
To the contrary, and we made that very clear. We thanked him for his information and moved forward.
Well,
And
how
in
did the
so
evidence
moving forward?
Go ahead. How did the evidence take you to
No.
more? Go ahead. I was going to say the evidence took
What
you.
the evidence was, well, the evidence took us by, in many respects, it's interesting that you mention it this way, because the evidence took us to what happened to, of course, President Kennedy.
Mhm.
When he found out about the Bay of Pigs fiasco, he wasn't properly briefed on the whole thing. But in 1961, when this was now taking shape, literally, on the island of Cuba, JFK realized that he got suckered into this thing, but that our government said that we would have air cover of the invading force that would be welcomed with open arms in Cuba. Didn't work out that way. We know that from experience, unfortunately, because of all the things that thereafter happened. So the Allen Dulles was fired in 61, and John McCone was then hired. He was a very pro-Kennedy lawyer, and on March 3rd, 64, inquiry was made at the time of what was Oswald doing. Was he a contract employee for the CIA and the FBI? The answer was yes. In 1957, that started. But they were there to deny it. They thought that was part of their job, because they said the American public, this always goes on in Washington. The only people who understand anything, if you're in Washington, are Washington. But the American people are too dumb to figure all this stuff out. Oh, hear the truth. Oh, my God, that would be a terrible thing to do.
Well, what did you see in those films, if you remember? Those getting back to the Georgetown archive.
What I remember very well, and I keep forgetting his name, but the lead guy who was the soldier for fortune.
David Ferry, or?
Ferry was there, but there was another person who was in charge. He was a swashbuckling.
Guy Bannister, or I'm trying to think who else could be militarily related to this.
Bannister could have been. When I hear his name, I know he was a very swashbuckling guy, and he was in charge of the whole crew.
Yeah.
And this was a group that was a militia.
Yeah.
And they were deciding what was going to happen with respect to everything that we're talking about here. But what happened was, I think it's important to note, is that in 1964, in March, James Rowley was chief of the Secret Service. And he wrote a letter to, he wrote a note, call it what you will, to John McCone, who now was head of the CIA. And in it, he was concerned that there were certain leaks that were going on that indicated that Oswald was a contract employee of the CIA and the FBI. Well, the government didn't want anybody to know that. So that's what they were originally concerned about. And then that morphed into what I'm going to give you in substance here, which is somewhat shocking, or it's very shocking, I should say, not somewhat. Mm-hmm. And that is that McCone wrote a letter back to Raleigh. And in the letter, he said, I'm concerned about leaks about Lee Harvey Oswald, which the government is training him in his suspect activity. He said, because I'm very concerned that if this info in any way is disclosed to the wrong persons, it would lead the media to erroneously claim that this agency, the CIA, and perhaps others were directly involved in the Dallas action. Keep in mind, as you know, I'm sure, the Dallas action was the term they used to talk about the assassination. And matter of fact, that was part of my original title, but I changed it to That Day in Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill the president. Mm-hmm. I didn't want, there were some people who actually had a Dallas action group, which I didn't know about. And I don't want to argue with them or anything else. I said, thank you. And, about 15 seconds, ignored them. That Day in Dallas, that's how we got the title on the book.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
So what happened was McCone then said the following. This was a 2-page letter. I refer to it as a letter. And on page 2, in paragraph 6 of this document, he says the following: while the persons involved in the assassination were in the employ of this agency, as well as the FBI. Let me repeat that. It's so overwhelmingly shocking. It took me about 10 times to read this when I first got my hands on it. It's the single most important document in the case.
Where did you get it from?
Good question. I traced of course, the government right away said this thing is a false thing, as if someone would make this up when I'm about to finish reading to you.
Yeah.
Who's going to make up that they murdered the president? I mean,
Maybe,
who in their right mind is going to do that? But anyway,
maybe.
I went through the exercise
Okay.
of calling upon the finest researchers, good people, solid citizens, to back up starting in 1978 with all the numerology that's involved. And I'm sure you know that as a researcher. It all fit in, the numbers before, the numbers with the document, and then it was used in the book. It was used in the book. What's his name's book?
Groden's book?
I'm sorry, I'm losing my marbles here.
No, I mean Robert Groden has it in his new book.
Oh yeah, well. no. Robert Groden is a key player in this whole story. God bless him.
Well, let me just bring Groden in right now, because he is one of the key players. So Robert is here as well. You guys may know each other. This might be old home week. I don't know when the last time you guys spoke, but welcome, Robert Groden, back to the show. Robert's been on here a bunch of times before. Robert T, Robert G. Welcome, both of you. Let me just interrupt if I may. Go ahead.
Robert Groden is a critically important person in this whole story. And in my book, I made reference to the foreword of the book by Robert Groden. He's on the cover of this book. And it's very honorable, as far as I'm concerned, about authenticity, because it's important to understand how many lies this government has told us in 62 years. I'll go through some of them. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And it's almost like, okay, this happened, when you pass the lamb chops. It's like, why is this happening? And Groden I am a latecomer to the whole story. And that is to say, I lived through it and then waited all these years for personal reasons not to publish, and then decided I would. But I wouldn't.
Yeah, why now? I meant to ask you that, Rob. Why now?
Well, it's very personal, but I'll share it with you. Bob Groden knows the reason for this. I had a bout with a number 4 cancer situation, and that happened when I started my book. I was dissatisfied with what I did with my book, so I had already sent stuff into the publisher, and I threw it away. Then I get hit with this diagnosis in '79, and which is why it took me about 5 years to get this book done. And then I was diagnosed with this cancer. And bottom line is that I was not going to have the surgery. And people who know this, it's heartbreaking for me to even talk about it, to the extent that I met so many people who have been touched by cancer. It's like it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
And I was totally unaware of any of it. But anyway, what happened was I went through the process of going through the cancer issues, and I didn't want my family, because I was not going to have that surgery. That's where you wear a bag for the rest of your life, at least one, and so on and so forth. Right. And it's not a style of life I can ever live with. Right. And that's just my opinion. It's no one else's opinion.
Well, you come from an athletic background, as I recall. So, I mean, you were
totally. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
Right. And so at a New Rochelle playing hoops up there.
That's exactly right. It was a blessing. New Rochelle, Brooklyn for 12 years, and then New Rochelle for the remainder, and then college at Cal at Berkeley. But I was very much involved with doing what I thought was important for my family to know, and that was I wasn't walking away from anything, but I did the radiation and I did the chemo. And when I did that, there was a great doctor. He was built like a one iron from
Houston.
where was he from?
MD Anderson.
The MD Anderson Center, yeah, in Houston. Fabulous character. We went around the country trying to find the doctors on. Anyway, the bottom line to the story is that I went through the things that you would want to go through in order to see if anything's going to happen. I never believed anything would happen. I'm on death row here. That's it.
Right.
You know, you don't go crying. Why me? Boom. I thank God because of all the blessings I've had, and you gentlemen, and particularly Groden, were outstanding people who I've met in my life as a result of all this. So the bottom line to the whole story was that I got a telephone call from my chief surgeon who runs the whole process here in LA, David Hoffman, and he said, I have to see you right away. And I went to his office. I said, what else can happen here? And he said, do you believe in miracles? I said, no, give me a break here. I'm a Yankee fan, for Christ's sake. I don't believe in miracles. And he said, look, this thing has gone away. The tumor is gone. That's what I said. What? Because I would say to him, why are we going through all this really? He says, Bob, the idea is to shrink this thing. So anyway, as a result of that experience, I decided the time had really come for me to give for what it's worth to people.
Yeah.
I'm not here saying I'm honoring you particularly and Groden, very much so, because he stood in front of tremendous opposition, which I never had to face.
Right.
And he stood tall. And for that, I believe we owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. He certainly has mine, and anyone I know who knows anything about what happened here. And when people praise me for what I did, I immediately talked about Groden. That's why he's on the cover of my book.
So Bob, let's bring Bob in. Bob, Groden, how many times were you arrested by the wonderful police in Dallas, Bob?
Well, I was arrested twice, but I was ticketed 84 times.
84 times for what were your crimes against humanity at that time?
Selling my magazine.
And your magazine
One
featured
copy of my magazine.
your magazine covered one subject, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Right.
The assassination.
Well, let's get into that really because
really quickly, Mark.
Go ahead.
Well, we've got them both here. I got a huge super chat in this question on both of them. Robert Tanenbaum stated a 27-degree declination hit on Connolly from the Dallas Records building. The manhole cover on Elm Street also has a bullet mark from this location. Robert Groden even has a shell. Can we conclude 2 shots were fired from this building?
Yeah, what the question to me is, that's right. Dr. Robert Shaw was Connolly's thoracic surgeon, and he was dictating within an hour, just as doctors do, mostly medical examiners, so that if anyone picks up the case, they have the material. They just don't start from a de novo hearing. And he had no idea what that meant. He said that when he talked about the wound, the shot that hit Connolly, which was in the first 3 shots, the first flurry.
It's a can down there.
Shaw said that it had a 27-degree declination. He didn't have any understanding what that had to do with the whole picture, other than it was a shot, and in and out, and it was a downward track. Well, it turns out that from the county records building in the northeast corner of Elm Street, directly to the rear of the presidential limo, that point of entry from the county records building is a direct shot from the rooftop. And it comes out at 27 degrees. Let me repeat this thing. The 27-degree significance is Robert Shaw, Dr. Shaw didn't understand, nor should he have. He was just simply dictating facts. And one of the facts he dictated was the declination of the bullet, the downward track, the in and out wound. We now know, we knew then, that the county records building in the northeast corner of Elm Street to the point of contact in the limo was 27 degrees. So when people talk about where was the other shooter, strong argument in my world that there were other shots that came from the stockade fence. How do we know that? Because people were there. They hit the deck, and they had children, some of them, and they said shots were coming over our head from the stockade fence area. And here is a perfect example of where a shot, if you were going to murder anyone, I mean, God, I hate to even use that language if you're going to murder anyone, but if you were involved in any of these activities, let's say, that from the top of the county records building would be a perfect place to wind up with a shot taken, because it was a straight shot. There was no foliage. There wasn't issues.
Well, we know that Weatherford was up there, but Bob and I, Groden, have talked about possibly that same 27-degree shot coming from the roof of the Texas School Book Depository. Bob and I, in the last episode, speculated that they even found a British Enfield up there and was brought down from the fire escape. Robert T. Bob G., you want to comment on the two rooftops?
Yeah, well, the one that Bob T is talking about is where this bullet shell was found. This one right here.
Okay.
30-06. And this is the shell. The bullet itself, of course, is no longer in it. What happened was when they were redoing the roof of the county records building, they were digging up the tar paper and the metal flashing, and as they did that, they found this shell right.
When was that?
Under that.
When was that?
No, this is some years ago. It was a long time after the assassination. And this is very weathered.
Well, do you think Weatherford took that shot? Either one of you guys?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I believed it for a long time. Somebody asked him once if he shot the president, and he said, "I shoot a lot of people, you little bastard."
Well, that was almost a deathbed confession, Bob, right?
Pretty much so.
Very late in his life, and there was a patrolman who supposedly grabbed the barrel of his rifle and said it was pretty hot when he went up to the roof to interact with him.
I don't know.
Yeah. But I just wanted to get back to this Connolly thing, because nobody's ever talked about Connolly except me. And I bring this up every time because Connolly's shot, which is, like you said, and it's in your book, Robert T., is shot at a 27-degree downward angle. Now, from my point of view, the shot goes through his back, out his chest, into his left thigh, Robert T. So I always thought the shot came from right to left because it ends up in his left thigh. And I always ruled out the criminal courts building because that was sort of behind him to his right. And that's why I always felt that the better shot, just for Connolly, was from the roof of the Texas School Book Depository at the same 27-degree angle, by the way.
Well, you're touching upon a very important point, and that is the legitimacy of what happened with respect to the single bullet.
Yeah.
You know, and as Bob Groden has said many times, this is the most talented single bullet in human history. And the reason for it is that what we were able to find in Washington, which was interesting, very interesting from my point of view and from Bob's, and anyone who's concerned about getting to the truth here, is that there were fragments that we didn't know the origins of. It turned out that because of Bob Groden, we realized, going frame by frame from frame 313, which I'm sure you know about, that Zapruder frame 313, that shows the shot to the head from the right front of the limo. That's the shot originated from the front. Okay, blows out the back of his head. And keep in mind that Bob Groden was a photographic consultant for the committee, the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Is that where you two guys originally met, by the way, just so we have some chronology?
Yes,
Bob
totally.
G., when did you come on and meet Bob T, if you remember.
Very, very early on. I was hired as a staff photographic consultant by Congressman Thomas Downing. Oh, good grief. Anyway,
I guess this is a witness sketch in a trial or something. I don't know why they have a sketch of you.
that's embarrassing. Anyway, I was hired, and I was there. I was one of the very first people hired.
Anyway, the point that I wanted to make about the thing that Groden had talked about with me was that we didn't see the flare. There's a flare in the film, as you know, at frame 313.
Yeah.
It's that blast to his head.
Yeah.
Which was the fourth shot, as we calculated, the fourth shot. And it came with a major boom blast from the stockade fence area, which if you were on the bridge watching, as Holland was and others, you would turn to your left because of the blast effect. And was this he would hit with a bat so that his head snaps back. Kennedy's head snaps back and to his left and falls into his wife's arms, his shoulder, rather, her right shoulder. So what we decided to do was to go frame by frame from frame 313. And we come to frame 328, and lo and behold, at 328, there's damage. And that's one of the 4 areas of damage. Keep in mind, what happened here is during our investigation, and again, we had no reason to have anything predetermined at all. We were very, very much involved in dealing with the here and now and the facts. Not like I know something and you'll never understand routine. That's nonsense.
Right.
And so there were 4 things that happened from this fragmentation. Why we realized that this was the 5th shot that hit Kennedy in the cowlick in the top of the head. There's no other way for this to happen. And here were the 4 things.
Well, let me ask something about that shot to the cowlick in the back of the head. What evidence do you have that he was shot in the cowlick in the back of the head?
I'm going to give it to you right now.
Okay, go ahead.
That's exactly why you invited us to the dinner, in a manner of speaking.
Well, let's eat some dinner, Bob. Let's go.
All right, no, anytime. I just want to make sure Groden's there because I have no more trust in anyone than Groden. Okay. The first is Kennedy's head then moves forward. It moves forward. Now, people who came in late into this thing, late meaning at the time of occurrence, think that's how it happened. They were wrong. This was the 5th shot. His head is already blown out. Ample evidence for that, right? Which I can go into.
Yeah.
Ample evidence.
Right.
And then his head moves forward and it enlarged the wound. This is an interesting point. It enlarged the wound on JFK's head because when you watch it at 18.3 frames per second, it's very hard to process. But you can actually see a flap emerge over the right temple area. That's the second thing that happened. The third thing that happened was that there was damage to the interior of the limo to the left of the rear view. That's what we were looking for, to see where was that, since we didn't see it flared as we see in 313, frame 313. And the 4th thing, which is very significant in this, is it's interesting why you have to cover every aspect, is that Connolly was shot with a fragment.
He was shot with a fragment of a bullet?
The fragment injured him. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
The fragment injured him, and because what happened was, and this
you're saying in your book, you say the fragment.
This is the nonsense of the single bullet theory. Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying in your book, you say the fragment injured his wrist.
This is what I'm getting to right now.
Okay, I'm just adding that on. Go ahead.
What it did, because part of the whole nonsense of the single bullet theory is, we know from the evidence, because of the film, that when JFK is hitting the first flurry, it's a downward track and it's 5 or 6 inches below the neckline. Kennedy has a wound, an opening in his throat.
Right.
But this track is below that, 5 or 6 inches. The single bullet theory, which plays into what I'm trying to tell you about this last episode of fragmentation, was that the bullet somehow came out JFK's throat because it allegedly, according to the government, the lying government, it struck Connolly in the back. It hit his rib, and it fractured his axial nerve on his wrist and severed the tendon between his right thumb and index finger. Well, how did it come up? And what does the government tell you? It came up 11 degrees. This was a downward track bullet that comes up 11 degrees and comes out the throat in order for that to happen. But what we did know was that there was injury to Connolly's wrist. And the reason I'm focusing on that was there's an important exhibit that you have seen, Bob knows all about, and it's very clear that the government did 5 shots. They performed an experiment, and in the 5 shots were the pristine bullet. That's not the bullet; it's my pen. It was the pristine bullet, my pristine pen.
Pristine pen.
And they showed that the pristine
Well, this was again also Arlen Specter out of Pennsylvania with his magic
Arlen
bullet.
Specter, the joke is Sprague worked for Arlen Specter.
I was just going to say that to you.
And he was ordered by the CIA to come up with a one bullet theory.
I know.
That's his contribution to lying in history.
Look at his
Anyway,
reward.
let me get back to this shot.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because what happened was all of the damage that occurred on that the last piece I said that struck Connolly in the right wrist and severed the tendon and so on, that aspect of the case is very, very significant because it tells us how how other people were affected by that kind of fragmentation. So his head moved forward. The wound was enlarged. The interior to the limo was damaged to the left of the rear view, and Connolly gets struck, and in so getting wounded, if you will.
Yeah.
That was very significant. Why? Here's the coup de grace. He was holding on to his hat. How do we know this is what I'm giving you is the emis, as we say in Brooklyn?
Wait a minute.
The reason is that he was holding on to his Stetson hat throughout all this, firing in a fashion which I call upside down. As he flipped it up, it would be on his head. It was like he then dropped the hat. When he got hit with that fragment, that would be the equivalent of knocking my shin out and breaking the shin on my foot, on my leg. I couldn't stand up. Having the axial nerve damaged, shot, wounded, caused him to drop that hat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's see, if someone said, why is that important in this case? He dropped his hat. You'd have to go back to square one here. Get me Groden, Lee. We'll start with him.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, the Connolly shooting has never been looked at separately, which is what I've been yelling about for 20 years. And I've talked to Bob. But Bob, go ahead. What's your take on it, Groden?
The Dallas doctors were pretty much ignored because they weren't allowed to talk.
Yeah.
I interviewed 22 of them. And one that really relates to what Bob is saying was Dr. Robert Shaw, the doctor who had worked on Governor Connolly. He was interviewed at about 4:00 in the afternoon on the day of the assassination at a press conference. And one of the members of the press asked him, he said, "What about the bullet in Governor Connolly's leg?" And his answer blows the whole thing apart for the government. He said, "The bullet is still in Governor Connolly's left leg, in his thigh. It is not life-threatening. When he stabilizes, it will be removed." When he said this, CE 399, the magic bullet that this is supposed to be, was already in Air Force One on the way back to Washington.
Thereby eliminating the magic bullet theory just by that alone, right?
Exactly. It's an extra bullet that nobody ever talked about. But I've got 2 different TV stations that videotaped that particular press conference with Shaw saying that.
Right.
I interviewed Dr. Shaw myself years later, and he said there's no way in the world that he could see that the bullet that hit the president hit Governor Connolly.
Right. And don't forget the Barrett, FBI agent Barrett, who picks one up out of the grass and flies that back to Quantico. I mean, there's multiple bullets that are unaccounted for here, right, Bob?
They were reproducing themselves.
Yeah, they were breeding. They were breeding. But
Yeah.
I just want to say something about the windshield shot. I mean, that bevels inward. That windshield shot bevels inward. Where do you think that shot came from into his throat? And what number do you assign that shot in your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shooting, as you say in the book?
Good question. Keep in mind, we were only able to prove, in my opinion, the 5 shots. That doesn't mean there were only 5 shots. No one
Right.
should think that there were only 5 shots.
Right.
More likely than not, in my opinion, it would have probably come from the stockade fence area.
Yeah.
Because the limo hadn't passed it yet, and that's how the action really occurs in the whole case. But I think that
And getting back to the Cowlick shot for another shot, just for a second, where does that exit in your theory?
which shot is this now?
The one to the Cowlick that you described from the in back of the head that makes his head go forward. Where does that shot come out of?
Well,
where
that's
does it
so-
exit? Where does it exit? Let me put it that way.
Right. To me, what makes most sense here, I hate to do this because I'm speculating and I don't want
Okay,
to speculate about this, but to try to put this whole thing together, it probably came from the building because it was a direct shot. In other words, there was no finagling of angles. If you went to the top of the rooftop there, you
Yeah.
know this area very well. If you
Well,
went
Robert
to the
knows it better than me, but yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, you would see that it's a direct shot to him, to the car.
yeah,
And so, more likely than not, it's the best I can say here. I hate to get involved in this because, you see, part of the whole problem here is that the government, people say, well, the government was a little naive. They weren't naive at all. They knew what they were
how could they
doing
be
from day one.
naive? Robert, how could they be naive when 18 minutes after the shooting, they're putting out an APB with a description of Lee Harvey Oswald? They couldn't have been that naive.
No, my point is exactly.
Yeah,
that the
no, that's what I'm saying.
the government knowingly contrived a predetermined conclusion through the pretense of an investigation. That's what this is all about.
Right.
And a major person who, to me, should be honored in American history, and I hope I've done that in my book, is sitting right there, Bob Groden, taking on the so-called geniuses about everything. They're lying. The government has was since 62 years.
He's saying a lot of very nice things about me. I want to mention the fact that he is a personal hero of mine and has been since 1975. He's
Thank
a
you very much.
great man, and I'm so glad that he wrote the book. Tells this whole story of what really happened when we had one real good chance of finding out all the truth. There it is. And the thing
Thank
is,
you. My favorite cover. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
let's just get into Mexico City while I have you two guys here, because you guys know Mexico City and what happened down there, and we can discuss ballistics till the end of time. But you interviewed a guy named David Atlee Phillips about Mexico City, Bob, and in that interview you showed him, or you had a document indicating knowledge of FBI agents who had listened to the tapes of this phony Oswald in Mexico City. Maybe let's talk about that for a second. What was your takeaway from David Atlee Phillips, the CIA chief of the Western Hemisphere, based in Mexico City, by the way?
This serves two wonderful purposes about how Bob Groden and I differ from the people in Washington. Because I didn't order, whenever I had an interview with someone, I didn't order their, the testimony, the Q&A. It's not what I did. That's not why I was there, to get involved in having a library, if you will. And the reason I mention it, if I didn't order it and it's not around, no, it never happened. Well, I got news for you. If there was no transcript of this particular conference we're having, if you will, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Now, as far as what did happen was that, what specifically, tell me what it is you want me to focus
Well,
on.
he wasn't subpoenaed. I mean, this is my first question to you personally.
Yeah.
Was David Atlee Phillips subpoenaed, or did he appear without counsel on his own to talk to you in your office?
No, absolutely good. All right, we're on Phillips. Phillips is an amazing character in this whole story. He's knee deep in everything that the CIA and what the evidence suggests here happened. And so I decided that Dick Sprague, as I said, for whom I had the utmost respect, interviewed Phillips in December of '76. And we hadn't yet geared up. But, Dick was an amazing, aggressive person. And he asked about this in this telephone call, which the audience should know if they don't already, and that it was on October 1st, '63.
Yeah.
There was a telephone call made by an individual who identified himself as Lee Henry Oswald. You notice how I said Henry to shock you?
Yep.
Okay. Now, that telephone call is interesting to me from an investigative point of view for many reasons. And why? Because in the telephone call, why would anyone 6-7 weeks before the assassination be involved with Lee Harvey Oswald? What created that? In other words, if it was, and the government never corrected the Lee Henry thing, and this person who said it was Lee Henry Oswald, he called himself Lee Henry Oswald, went on to have other conversations with various characters in this whole story. And our government not only didn't correct it, but why again were they interested in Oswald 6-7 weeks before the assassination? That had to be answered here. And the fact that it was never answered was something I wanted to deal with. So I immediately got in touch with Phillips. And he said,
well, let me ask something. How do you get in touch with Phillips? You call the CIA and say, bring your ass over here? How does that physically work?
Yeah, he's a major operator in the CIA in charge of Western Hemispheric operations.
Okay.
If you asked him whatever the hell it was, I am, David Phillips in charge of Western Hemispheric operations. It was like a record.
Right.
So I said, when you come here to the committee, we have subpoena power here.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how short-lived it would be. But this was part of why they shut us down. And he said, sure, I'll come over. So he comes over. And he says exactly what he said to Sprague. And what he said to Sprague was, at the end of '76, he said that he says to Sprague that
the tapes were that he erased the tapes, or they were destroyed, or
the tapes were not available.
Not available.
The tapes were not available because we recharge our tapes every 6 or 7 days. That was the kicker. So I said, you mean to say that there is no record then of the tapes themselves, so we can listen to the tape and investigate why someone became a Lee Henry Oswald person, and no one in the government thought it important enough to change it, but they continued on with him like that.
Yeah.
And why it was Oswald they were interested initially. And he said, yes, that's correct. Shortly thereafter, I get my hands on a memo dated November 23rd from J. Edgar Hoover to all supervisorial staff at the FBI. And guess what he says? The fact is, he says, our agents who have questioned Oswald for the past 17 hours on November 22nd have listened to the tape made of Lee Henry Oswald, the person who identified himself as Lee Henry Oswald. I'm just giving you the substance here. And that occasion has remained in place, if you will.
Mm.
And I showed him this letter.
Oh, the letter from the Hoover memo is what you're
The Hoover
referring
memo
to.
is what I mean to say. I
To all
couldn't
essays, to all agents in charge across the
Right,
country.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
wasn't it
in the
seven?
VA's office? All your evidence are in letters, not in anything else, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was 7 FBI agents, Bob, right, who had actually
He
listened
was questioned
to.
allegedly for like 17 hours.
Right.
And-
So
and he
they,
was-
they knew Oswald's voice, absolutely knew it, the tone of his voice.
That's what they
And-
alleged.
and-
They listened to
and
the tape.
And they said he was an imposter to J. Edgar Hoover on the tape, that this was not Lee Harvey Oswald on the tape.
That's exactly right. The agent said the voice on the tape is not the voice of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right. But he
And-
claimed he had already destroyed those tapes, that being David Atlee Phillips. So that's
He-
awkward. That's awkward.
That's right. His claim was that they were recycled.
Right.
But now we know that's not true. That's
Right.
one of the first lies in this case. If you wanted to start documenting lies,
Yeah, no, I've said
the
for
first
years, it's
degree
the
issue
first, it's the
it's
first
a very
Achilles
important
heel.
issue
Yeah.
for the two
Yeah.
reasons I'm saying. Why Oswald 7 weeks before the assassination, and where's the tape? Why
Well,
they
let me ask Groden, was Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City?
I don't believe he was.
Either do I, but go on.
It's possible that he was, but there was also somebody there, one way or the other, whether he was there or not, using his identity,
Right.
and got the middle name wrong.
Right. So well, this is supposedly Ralph Gebb or somebody else. It was never really verified who this was.
Well, David Phillips, let me interrupt for a minute because I don't want
Go
to
ahead.
forget this.
Yeah, go ahead.
David Phillips had a debate with Mark Lane about 2 years after this whole thing shut down.
It was at
And
your
it was-
alma mater. Wasn't it your alma mater?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the bottom line was that the notion here was that Oswald that Phillips maintained that let me go back. A major movie producer who did Judgment at Nuremberg was permitted to ask some questions. And he said to Phillips, "Why are you trying to destroy the career and life
Oh yeah.
of Mark
Yeah.
Lane?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I apologize for that. And I want to also say, and this is why I've interrupted, which I hate to do."
It doesn't
And
matter.
he said, and this is why I have to tell everybody that the entire Mexico City affair was fabricated.
Right.
It was one big lie. And that was said at this debate with Mark Lane. Mark Lane and I, interestingly,
I was going to
Maybe-
ask you about Mark Lane.
yeah, well, I'll tell you something. It's why you have to have an open mind with all this stuff. You can't go into things like this or anything from my point of view, with case closed. I found out ABC routine. Mark
That
Lane,
was-
probably
By the way,
agreed-
just to interject, that was Abby Mann who asked that
Abby
question.
Mann, thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Abby
I'm sorry.
Mann.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
on.
Governor,
Go on about Mark Lane.
Yeah. I mean, Abby Mann, it was a great question. Abby Mann asked.
Yeah.
He was offended by this whole thing, and Mark Lane, he was trying to destroy Mark Lane's life. So the question arose. He said, "I want to apologize," because he knows that what's his name was indicted for lying to the Congress.
Richard Helms.
Helms, exactly.
Yeah.
So he was clearing himself, and he throws in that the whole Mexico City thing was a fabrication. So
You can't go further than that. Here's the guy running it, says it was a fabrication. I don't even know why this is still an issue.
well, it's like past the lamb chops, okay? I mean, nobody. The whole notion of what's going on here is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
We're talking about people who murdered the president. What else do you want to talk about?
Nothing indicts the CIA more than Mexico City. You could take apart the entire case in 5 seconds when you begin to look at what Robert Tanenbaum is discussing here, because of the tapes, the FBI having listened to the tapes that David Atlee Phillips says that he's destroyed, They clearly listened to him and clearly said, and as Hoover says to LBJ, we have an imposter down in Mexico City in the LBJ Hoover conversation late in November 22nd. I mean, it's there in the document between Hoover and LBJ, for Christ's sakes.
And the notion was, when I showed him the memo, letter, document, whatever you want to call it, about Hoover having his staff listen to this tape that Phillips lied about, as well as other in the government, its existence. You imagine, though, we don't have enough funding here, so we have to, finagle and erase what we have. That nonsense.
Right. We're on a tight budget in Mexico City.
What did he do? You asked the right question. What did he do when I showed him the memo?
Yeah.
Well, it was said
Read
by
it, he folded it up.
I'm sorry,
put it in his breast pocket. He walked out of the room.
I'm sorry, Groden, what were you saying?
one of the people who had heard the tape, the so-called Oswald tape, that it was not Lee Harvey Oswald's voice.
Right.
Definitely.
Exactly. That was what the whole story was about.
Well, what I'm saying is there were 7 FBI agents who listened to the tape, Bob.
Exactly.
Not just
The
one.
FBI
It was
agents
all
who-
7 that had interrogated him.
The FBI agents who investigated the case on Friday when Oswald was arrested,
Mhm.
and they fingerprinted him and everything else and all this other stuff, because that plays into the next day or so as to why Oswald was brought back, and so on. His hands were inked and so on. But Phillips took the memo that I showed him when he lied,
Mhm.
and folded it up, put it in his breast pocket, and disappeared. And that was the end of Phillips, as far as we were concerned. As a matter of fact,
It was the end of you
I mean, the end of the
also.
whole committee.
Isn't that the end of your tenure and Sprague's tenure was because of the Phillips, the lack of desire, whatever you want to call it, to pursue David Atlee Phillips?
Because I said, as I said initially here, Lou Stokes, who was the chairman of the committee from Cleveland, said when I had 2 subpoenas. One was to get the information that the CIA had about its activity in the assassination, and the other one was to determine whether or not it was a rogue experience, that there was some rogue characters in the CIA. Not that I needed, further corroboration of characters in the CIA, but
Mhm.
again, this was important stuff to lay out the foundation, all of which had nothing to do with opinion. It had to do with hardcore facts that you could walk into any courtroom in America and try this case. And
Well,
if
let
you
me
do
ask
try
Bob,
this
let me
case-
ask Bob Groden a question, because I wanted to talk about Vincent Drain, the Dallas police officer who was obsessed with getting Oswald's fingerprints onto that rifle. Bob, what do you know about that?
What I will add to that whole issue is, you mentioned before about the fingerprinting ink on
Yeah.
Oswald's hands.
Yeah.
People think when they hear this that they fingerprinted them and transferred the fingerprints onto the rifle. That's not the way it happened.
Go ahead.
The way it makes sense is that they needed Oswald's fingerprints to match a fingerprint record somewhere.
Ah,
I
good
think
point.
they fingerprinted him, made a phony record showing his fingerprints, and they matched that to actually transferring his regular fingerprints without ink
Right.
to the rifle. I want to add something before too much goes by. We didn't. You asked me before when I first met Bob, and that was back in 1975, and that's when I first met him. A few weeks later, I was down there in the office, and he called me into his office, and he sat there at the desk, and he looked at me. He said, "Robert, you were right. You were all right. This goes to the highest levels of government. We're going to blow it out of the water." And that's when he was aware, and I was aware of what a great man he was. But he had something, and I have it now, and you mentioned it before. That's what we call the smoking gun document. It's the McCone Rally document. This was his copy of it. This particular copy of it was set to be destroyed by the House committee years after he left and about a week before I left.
Whose copy was it?
It was the it was the HSCA, the House Assassinations Committee.
Okay.
And that's the document. This is the copy that you're seeing here is the clear copy that I published in my book, Absolute Proof. Bob also has it in his book, That Day in Dallas. It's perhaps the single most important document in the entire case. It blows the whistle on everything. It gives you the who, what, where, and why about Oswald and the CIA. And Bob had it. Thank God he had it, because I have it too. I have 2 copies of it. One was sent by mail to me.
Mhm.
And I know the other one I got was given to me by the HSCA.
Well, where do you think it came from, Bob?
I think it's legitimate. I think it's totally
No,
legit.
I'm saying who gave it to you?
Well,
In the mail or at HSCA?
somebody at the HSCA. I was there at a Christmas party before they closed their doors, and I noticed that there was a door open to a closet.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of photographic stuff in there. And I said, "Can I have a look? Is any of this stuff mine?" And they said, "Yeah, help yourself. Take what you want." So I took 2 things. I took the large exhibits that I had created for the committee, which were shown in the hearings, and I took a file that said Lee Harvey Oswald. In that file was their copy of this. They did have it, and it was used in a book you mentioned before, Bob, about the man who knew too much.
Oh, the Dick Russell book. But
Russell.
only in the first edition, I think.
Only in the first
In
edition.
1991. It was in 1991. Right.
Yeah, but the thing is, when he first used it, he only quoted parts of it verbatim.
This is Dick Russell you're talking
Nothing
about.
of real importance.
You're talking about Dick Russell's book, The Man Who Knew Too Much.
The copy that he saw was in the National Archives, and I have a feeling was strongly redacted. Otherwise, he would have used that stuff too.
In the second edition you're talking about. Or
Yeah, the second edition, the paperback.
it doesn't have it in the second edition. It's in the first, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct. But it's very, very important. If somebody has either of our books, please look it up and read it very carefully, and understand that it was simply a memorandum between one man and another. It was not an official document and does not have an official form. One of the things that they talked about, it was Oswald's clearances, his security clearances. They lied about it. He was above top secret. And they
What
say,
is above top secret? That's
it's
another level, or
it
That's like
is
TSS
at least 2 levels above it. One of them
okay.
is
Crypto.
Yeah, crypto. That voice you just heard was my wonderful wife. She's my memory.
Hi, Janet. Hello, Janet.
Yes, that's sweet Janet. Anyway, I totally endorse Bob's book. It's very important. It's a piece of history. We finally, after the release of the Zapruder film, which I was very, very proud to be able to take credit for, Zapruder, Nixon, much more, all the rest of them. It opened the door. It created the situation that brought he and I together. And when I started talking about this, I mentioned the work that he had done several times, and he confirmed it and made me very, very proud. Very proud. I'll say it, I said it before, and I'll say it again. He's a hero of mine.
Thank you very much.
He
Thank
deserves
you. I appreciate that very much.
Anyway, get his book. It's worth it.
Okay, that's a good point. Now, let me ask something. How much, getting back to Robert T., How much did Ted Kennedy help you with this research at the House Assassinations Committee, Bob?
I could say he stands with some others in the family who did absolutely nothing. And
Did you reach out to contact him?
oh yeah, of course. I felt as aside from everything else, it's a member of the family, and my practice was always to make sure that the families understood what we were doing in the particular homicides that I was involved with. So it was just a natural. But he totally, disavowed us. He had nothing to say to us.
That's bizarre.
I would say so. I can't begin to tell you.
I mean, not even a letter saying I'm deeply, grieving the loss, or any mumbo jumbo letter. Nothing.
Nothing. Not a word. And it was very odd for me personally, because when I was at Berkeley in my last year of law school in '68, and then went into the DA's office in Manhattan, I was very much a supporter of Bobby Kennedy, the father. And Patty and I were at his last function at Berkeley that he had before he was murdered. And Patty and I were going back to Manhattan because I was taking the New York bar in July, and God knows I would never be in California working as a lawyer or what have you. So accurate were my predictions of my life. And Patty woke me up, I don't know, the second day or third day in June, and said they just killed Bobby. So it's still shocking for me to talk about it in those terms, because it was so meaningful for this activity to happen, and people treated it like, as I always say, pass the coffee, please, or the lamb chops. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're not interested in what happened here, what should we be interested in?
Well, speaking of RFK, there's a part in your book when you go to meet with House Majority Leader Jim Wright, and you were talking to Jim Wright about the investigation, and what happened in that case?
Well, that's a classic. I mean, it was majority leader. I always felt that I wanted the powers that be knew what we were doing, because we got to get funded. And so I'm in his office, and I'm telling him in large measure, without the lapses and the pauses, about what was going on. And he sat back in his chair like so. He's a big fellow and somewhat of a daunting guy. I got a kick out of him. I don't know if half the time he was playing, acting, or what the hell was going on with him. And he flashed forward on me across the desk. He said, "You mean to tell me that Lee Harvey Oswald was involved with..."
Oh, I think you mentioned Sirhan.
Sirhan, right. I'm sorry. Sirhan.
Yeah, go on, just to correct him. Sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That Sirhan was involved in this case or something like that. And I said, no, I'm glad you raised that issue, because that's one of the problems we're having. It's not Sirhan. He killed Bobby Kennedy, allegedly.
Allegedly.
We're talking about the president of the United States, not the senator from New York. Oh, he did this. Oh. I'm not sure what that meant in his alleged mind, but I would tell you, it was so pathetic.
Yeah.
Because I always, as an assistant DA, I always had a detective with me whenever I questioned anybody about a case. And in this situation, I would have members of the committee, senior members of the committee with me, one or two.
Yeah.
And I realized I'm banging my head against a wall here, and I don't like it. So I stood up and I said, "You guys can take over now. This is beyond my comprehension. Let's leave it at that."
Wow.
I left. I never heard from him again. I mean, he was glad to see me go. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And
Well, Sprague, don't you find it odd that the day Sprague resigns, I think you resigned 3 months after Sprague, but the day
I resigned. No. Let's get this straight.
Okay, let's get it straight.
I resigned before Dick resigned.
Okay.
I resigned when I was in Lou Stokes' office.
Okay.
And Lou told me they were not going to recognize the subpoenas, and that they didn't, they were no longer aboard. They being the majority of the committee, the House Select Committee on Assassination.
Right.
I said, "Well, why'd you hire us? We told you, I told you, Dick told you at a meeting with the committee, all the members there, if you deal politically with this, we're going to leave." And we've said that we cannot compromise our investigation about the truth about what happened. I said, why'd you hire us? He said, Bob, the majority of the committee, he said, with his great twang from Cleveland, how he has a twang in Cleveland, only Lou knows. And he said to me that they never believed that you would get to the bottom of this mess and do it so quickly. This was like in the 4th month.
Wow.
So he said to me, I want you to do me what are you going to do? We stared at each other. I said, Lou, I resign effective now. I'm going to be seeing Dick in an hour. I don't know what he will do, although I have a very good idea what he will do. Knowing the man as I knew him then, we became, for 46 years thereafter, very close friends, tried cases together around the country, etc. So I don't throw these, accolades out necessarily, not that it matters to anybody other than me. But Dick immediately said he wanted to have a meeting with the chair, and would I arrange it? And I did. And
just to be clear, they cut off your phones and mailing privileges and subpoena power, and that also led to your decision.
Well, how can you conduct an investigation about this thing and not have subpoena power, and or go down to Dealey Plaza? And there's so many things you got to get involved with. So once they did that, we knew it was over, and we agreed we wouldn't go around having press conferences about anything. Basically, that's not why.
Let me just say something. Groden, were you still there at this time?
At the committee?
Yeah, when
Yes.
he's described, you were still there.
I was one of the first people hired. I was hired by Tom Downing, Congressman Downing, and I was there to the very, very end.
You were there past this event that Tanenbaum's describing.
Oh yeah. I found out about it. I was really deeply saddened.
Okay.
Well, what happened, just so you know, I stayed on for the transition. I didn't want this thing to just float away somewhere, even though I had no faith that they would seek truth. What I didn't realize was they would overtly lie about various things, which I can tell you chapter and verse of right now. It has nothing to do with opinion. They're overt lies. I didn't believe they would do that. So,
well, did you think it was odd that DeMorenschildt self-deleted himself the same day that Richard Sprague resigned?
DeMorenschildt, I subpoenaed.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
South Florida,
right?
And I wanted to speak to him for obvious reasons. DeMorenschildt had a lot of important information.
Yeah,
because all of a sudden this guy comes out of nowhere. He's some aristocratic character,
right?
And he's walking and waltzing Oswald around Dallas. And what happened was in the end, and Gaten Fonzie, with a great moniker, Gaten Fonzie, doesn't get better than that. He was an investigator for Sprague, and he worked for me. And I sent him down to Florida at the home of where DeMorenschildt was living and gave him the subpoena before we lost our subpoena power.
So he was the last. He was the last one. He was the last person to get a subpoena.
He was the last person to get a subpoena.
Wow, I never knew that.
It's interesting because I got a telephone call from the DA who said, we believe that it was he killed himself. I said, well, how do you know all that? And he said,
Bob, we got to be really careful on YouTube. You can't be descriptive or anything like that. Because
what's your take on DeMorenschildt?
What
was your take on him?
Seems to have been Lee Harvey Oswald's handler.
Yeah.
Working for the CIA, and there's so many aspects of this thing, of this case, that we tend to start talking about one thing, we get into something else, and the first thing goes away.
Yeah,
and there's just so much, and through the years, I mean, Bob and I have known each other for 62 years.
Wow.
And it's been an amazing adventure. You know, we got really close. He knows what happened. I know what happened. But the country doesn't know what happened. The world doesn't know what happened because it was taken over. The entire investigation was taken over by somebody who had worked for the CIA for over 20 years.
Did you stay on for Robert Blakey?
Yes. Blakey couldn't afford to hire me and couldn't to fire me because nobody else did what I did
Right.
with the films and photographs. And I analyzed hundreds and hundreds of photographs for them. And then we had a situation where there was a woman who worked for me who broke into my office and stole the entire archive. Thousands of pictures, originals, duplicates, positives, negatives, prints, negatives, but the slides more than anything else. And I went to every law enforcement agency in Texas. Nobody would lift a finger to try to recover them. As a matter of fact, there's a point where there was a lawsuit. I was suing to get the stuff back, and the judge in the case ordered her to give its stuff back or go to jail. She went to jail for 6 months rather than give it back.
This is from Al Gonzalez, if anybody wants to address this. Bob, retired NYPD here. Congrats on the new book. Hope to get it signed by you in Dallas. Thoughts on the Z film being altered, as you said in previous interviews, and I believe also Mazel.
Well, Al Gonzalez, I can tell you, is one of the great detectives who ever worked for NYPD.
This is a different Al Gonzalez.
He is an incredible person.
This is a different Al Gonzalez. Listen to me. This is a different Al Gonzalez, who was also an incredible detective for NYPD, also worked in the intelligence division, who is a fan of the show. Two different guys. I just want to interrupt. I'm sorry.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was leading up to, I didn't know he's still alive. God bless.
No, he would be 100 years old. This is a younger man.
Absolutely. God.
This is a much younger.
This is our Al Gonzalez.
This is another spry Al Gonzalez from the same police department, Bob.
Yeah. Well,
this sort of thing happens.
Gonzalez I work with.
Yeah, same name.
Actually, I assigned him to the Miami branch of this whole investigation. So
the original Al Gonzalez, not this one.
Yeah, the original Al Gonzalez. So he was a fabulous person. He worked on many, many cases when I was in the DA's office, major murder stuff. And he was, just a phenomenal person. I was always fortunate to have some great detectives. I always believed that if they went into private practice, they would have been the CEOs of General Motors. These guys were off the charts, sensational people. It's amazing.
You were talking
about
Bob?
Richard A. Sprague before.
Yeah.
There was also Richard E. Sprague, who was a leading photographic.
Right. Yeah.
From
Richard A. is our guy. Richard A.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Tanenbaum, what was your take on Blakey?
Oh, please. Well, man, let me just give you the facts. A man who never tried a case in his life, never investigated a murder case, is biting his teeth on this case. And among the first things he did was to hire people like Giannides and others, known CIA operatives. He turned this investigation over to them. And then he comes out with this cockamamie book about organized crime. The only thing that was organized was disorganized, in my opinion, about who he was and the role he misplayed in this whole historical event. So he's not a person I enjoy talking to. He knows me very well. He had friends who were in the DA's office.
Wow.
When I was running the homicide bureau and the criminal courts. And I always kept my caseload up so I could, get out of the nonsense of all these meetings you go to and just be in the courtroom and try murderers. So, but he is not a favorable person to me. And history has an obligation to judge exactly what he did and didn't do.
Well, let's get Groden in on here. What do you think, Bob?
I want to add something that happened directly with me.
Okay.
There was an issue that came up after a while about the acoustics evidence, the sound recordings of the shooting.
This is the Dictabelt recordings of the motorcycle cop.
Right.
Yeah, McLean.
We had several copies of my copies of the Zapruder film. We also had a copy of the film from the FBI with the Secret Service, and it was before the film was cut in two places, and it ran at the closest thing to an actual speed. But the original film was shot at 18 frames per second. The professional equipment that they had at the Library of Congress was all at 24 frames for sound, and they couldn't figure out what to do. I came up with this idea of getting a portable projector, 16 millimeter, with variable speed and like that. We could correct the speed of the sound recording to the actual Zapruder film.
Ooh.
And we, when I say we, myself, I can't think of the others. I'll think of them in a minute. The four of us were the four people who worked on the acoustics evidence. And the concept, the reason why I was down there was to make a sound version of the Zapruder film. Transfer the evidentiary audio tape with the film. And we had a problem. The problem was this. Professor Blakey wanted the shot from the grassy knoll to miss. He wouldn't allow it to hit.
Wow.
The shot was fired there, but he wouldn't allow it. So when I did the sound copy, I did it two ways. I did it with the third shot, the fatal shot, striking the head, and doing it another way with the way he wanted it, the fourth shot. And when we showed it to the actual committee members, I wanted to tell them the truth. Well, what we had all found, all four of us had found the same thing. And most of the committee members agreed. It was the shot from the knoll that hit the president. Professor Blakey told me that if I said a word about it, that he'd throw me in jail.
Oh my God. Wow. What a draconian thing. Wow.
So the thing is, even though everybody was, except Blakey, was saying that the shot from the knoll hit, he's saying it was fired, it didn't matter because it missed. This was a real problem. And we, within the committee, referred to it as Blakey's problem.
Wow.
That's what it was called.
Well, you'll be happy to know that Blakey ended up working for the State Department in the VIP Passport Expedition Office as a payback for what he did to you guys.
Yeah.
That was his quid pro quo for jamming up and stifling you guys.
You know, the reason why I left the committee, as I said, it became clear to me they weren't interested in the truth. And then you know what the real kicker here was? My wife and I were just married for a couple of years. We had one child. We were planned to have another one and so on. I could not believe that I would ever be able to face my children, my family, knowing that I participated in an insincere investigation, any investigation, much less of the United States president. Period. I never got carried away with it, and that's why I didn't have press conferences, etc. Why did I write the book? I don't know how much time I have, but I will tell you this. Thank God I got this book done. It took me 5 years because of all the treatments and so on, and this thing disappears. I mean, how did that happen? Why me? I say that all the time. Why me? When I see, and I went into waiting rooms to see the doctors filled up with people who were stricken with
Well, there's
cancer.
a lot of God in your book, Bob.
There's a lot of, yes. I mean, I purposely did that because I wanted you and others to know who I think I am based upon anecdotal tales. Because if you don't buy into that, throw the book away. Because what I'm saying is I am promising you based upon the evidence that Oswald could not have killed the president. So that's why I turned it into somewhat of a memoir up front.
Yeah.
Because it's our values. To me, what matters most in all of our discussions, and why I became very friendly with what's his name?
Dick Sprague.
What's his name? Who was the like the enemy of the major liberal of the lawyer?
Mark Lane.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Mark Lane. We became.
Yeah, I was wondering how you two got along. I was afraid
Well,
to
I'll tell
ask.
you why. I'll tell you exactly why. I took Mark Lane at face value.
Yeah.
I knew from the past things he said, et cetera, et cetera. You know,
Yeah.
I'm an American lover.
Yeah.
My parents were first generation Americans.
Yeah.
And every Friday night we went to my grandmother's house for dinner, kind of thing. All they talked about was how great it was only in America, only in America. So somewhere my value system is between Lincoln, Jefferson, and the rest of them. But I, under no circumstances, would have participated in doing anything that was self-aggrandizing. And that's why I waited and waited and waited until I realized, and you come to this when you do have people who have cancer, God, you pray for their well-being, but there's no end. No one beats the big C. I mean, we're off on a totally different subject here, but nobody beats the big C. You go through hell in this whole situation. I had no pain. I have no complaint. A miracle occurred.
Yeah.
A miracle occurred. Here I am. And, I hope that people will read the book and they'll read Groden's book and come to their own conclusions, period.
Really quickly, before we roll up, we've got some super chats I think we get to. I just want to get a couple of the questions that were directly to you guys, and then we can let you go. We got to do housekeeping and things like that. We kind of got sidetracked with Al Gonzalez. He asked a question. He's back again. He's saying, hey, what about the Zapruder film? Did you think it was altered? Bob T.
Well, was the film altered? Is that what the question is?
Yes.
Was that? I don't recall ever saying that. I mean,
let me get into this. The Zapruder film, the original film, the one I worked on, the one that Life magazine had, was not altered in any way except that Life magazine cut it in two places. They claim it was by accident when they were duplicating it, and it may very well be true. But there's a lot of people out there, starting with 3 or 4 people, that started the rumors that the Zapruder film was altered in some way and was cut. There's lots of arguments can be made. I make them every November to audiences to let them know the Zapruder film was not altered. And the thing is, we got to fight this now. We've got enough problems with the real conspiracy. We don't need that one as well.
No, that's absolutely correct. I mean, when you say, I said, as I said now, just spontaneously, and the recollection of ever saying anything like that, it was altered.
Okay, real quickly, just a quick question for both of you. Do you think it was more corruption or incompetence that has kept the truth hidden still?
One from column A and one from column B.
A little bit of both, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That
Depends on who you're talking about within it.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a wonderful look at both of your books, all of your books. I mean, between the two of you, you've got like 50 books. Let's, this is a good enough time to put an end to this thing. I think you have both demonstrated an incredible patriotism to do what you've been doing for 60 years together, separately. Tanenbaum working in the Justice Department and Groden working outside of it, doing his thing, but being a victim of Justice Departments, which is ironic. But both of you are American heroes of mine. I mean, like I said, when Tanenbaum came on, I've been following your career since I was a kid in Brooklyn. So, and Bob, I've known for a number of years through this channel. Both of you guys are heroes of mine. Hopefully, I'm going to get to meet Tanenbaum when we all end up in Dallas. If you're coming down, Bob, I don't know if you're physically going or you're going to do a virtual presentation. This is a way to buy tickets for the event. I'll be there. Obviously, Groden's going to be there with his wife, and Eric will be with us. Use Untold 10 to get a discount on the tickets down in Dallas. That's November 21st, 22nd, 23rd. We're going to be at the Fairmont Hotel. There's going to be a dinner. We're going to schmooze and we're going to spritz. We're going to talk to each other and compare notes in more detail than we can here on this particular channel. So it'll give you some more time to bring your questions to these guys, right, Eric?
Yes, and it's very important, though, that Untold 10. Use that coupon code, get your 10% off, and it also checks it off that we sent you. So it's important for your discount is important for us, so that way they know. Hey,
I
we
was
sent
talking
you.
to Bob today about what our presentation is going to be. Bob Groden. We're going to get into that a little later. The history of assassination cinema from a Hollywood point of view is what Bob and I are going to be doing. I guess Robert T, you'll be presenting from your book.
Nobody invited me, so I have not been invited to this convocation, but I hope it's successful.
Well, your name is on the poster, so you may want to check
Yes.
on that. I'm only asking because the name's on her poster there. So
Well, that's news to me.
somebody's
I mean,
impersonating you, or maybe
it's-
there's wishful thinking.
believe me, Marcus, it's news to me, and whether I'm there or not is not important to me. What is important is that you and people like you are there and just speak the truth. That's all.
Right.
I
Well,
wanna
gentlemen, go ahead,
thank
Rob.
you guys so much for doing this show.
Yeah, we got to keep it
Important.
going, Bob. I mean, you know my point on this thing about putting a dagger into the heart of the Zapruder conspiracy and other things that have come up over the years. We've worked together on this thing for a number of years now, and hopefully, God willing, Kanahara will keep going. Tanenbaum and Groden, a guy from Forest Hills and a guy from Brooklyn. What could be better for me from Sheepshead Bay? Absolutely great. All right, I'll see you guys in Dallas. God willing, and the creek don't rise and flood Dallas like it has in Kinky Friedman's old county there, Kerr County. Hopefully you guys will be down and we could all get together. Thanks for coming by, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you both
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Take care, Bob.
All right. So let's go and run through these other super chats before we head over to locals. And what do we have here? Steve London, happy birthday, Eric, in the polka dot dress. No dresses for me. Let's see. This is from Mike Schaefer. I'm fine with the Trump admin not releasing info. Trust Trump. They know what we don't. Trust their judgment. You need to know situation. We'll probably be talking about that more on Friday. It's not really kosher, the topic on hand. Bob Tranquilli, happy birthday, Hunley. Well, thank you very much. I always appreciate birthday wishes. Nick Giusti is saying, just wanted to say, great show as always. A huge thank you to Mr. Groden and Mr. Tanenbaum for shining light and truth on such a dark day in our country's history. I agree. It's very good having, and we're fortunate that they want to come on and talk with people like us. John S. with a $5 or £5 super sticker. Thank you. Nick Giusti again. One last thing, please like and subscribe for Eric's birthday. Happy birthday, Eric. Appreciate you. And yes, appreciate you too, Mark.
Thanks, Nick. By the way, as long as we're doing stuff, tomorrow on my channel, I've got this obscure character who's going to describe his entire life from the time he was born, and that's Rich Barris. This is going to be bizarre. Again, this is on What's Up with Lord Buckley. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to get to know Rich Barris from being a little baby to what made him into the People's Pundit. So he and his wife are sending me some very interesting photos about growing up in the Northeast, and we're going to have some fun tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on What's Up with Lord Buckley with the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, interviewing him about growing up in Jersey and his entire background.
Comparative UFO stories incoming.
Yeah, no, we're going to do that. We're going to get into everything. This is his military career and, growing up in an Italian household and being a descendant of immigrants from Italy and the whole gamut.
All right. By the way, on Thursday, because again, we're trying to do this thing where we're doing something at 5:36, 4 days a week. I will be putting up an interview with Robin Dreek, who is head of the FBI counterintelligence division, and it's about when CIA officers go wrong. Let me see. This is from, who was this? Donald Skywalker. You never let Bob finish the story about the memo regarding CIA involvement. The most important exhibit, he was interrupted and never finished. He actually did finish. We did circle back to it.
Yeah.
We may be discussing that on locals here in a moment. Those could be encouraging if you want to hear more.
Oh,
on that
yeah. We'll
memo.
talk some more about it. Yeah.
We'll talk about on locals. For all of our cool peeps, again, you can subscribe there for free.
Okay.
Let's see. Pirate Ken, I guess this, well, sorry about this. Guess this would be for Robert G. I just wanted to get clarification as to the source for the bullet mark on the cement manhole cover on Elm Street. I think they were saying from that other building, but I'm not sure. Treasure Hunter 100. Thank you for having these wonderful guests to educate us on facts, not just government nonsense. I agree. It's very helpful to have that. Pew Pew from Norway. Thank you very much. Great guest tonight. Happy birthday, Eric. Well, thank you. And I will milk my birthday as long as I can. The CCC video channel Deep State Ops with $20. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's a great name.
Members of the, is there another word here? Okay. Sorry. Members of the Warren Commission were hostile as if they were defense lawyers when it came to the witnesses, such as what they heard. Sorry. Has anyone tried to perform sound recordings of blanks shot from key points of interest? I don't know. I don't know if they have. That would be interesting to try. Al Gonzalez, Bob Tanenbaum, cop to cop, but you have said it was altered on numerous interviews available on YouTube. We'll discuss in Dallas.
Yeah, he kind of knows you anyway because he knows Al Gonzalez. You could just say I'm Al Gonzalez.
There you go. Stephen McMahon, what you steer Tannenbaum away from because of YouTube is in his book? Is it
No,
in his book?
Eric was just talking about the word suicide. That's all.
Oh, yeah. Because he doesn't know that. I have to assume that a guest who comes on the show speaks like a normal person, and they don't understand that we have to have a coded language on YouTube because
I said self-deleted.
I know you did, but I kind of was like,
I can't control him.
I can imagine that he was going, what the hell is this guy saying?
Well, I don't know what else I could do. I can only say what I'm going to say. So
yeah, I know. But we're just trying to work. Hey, Ron J, my B-Day too. Happy birthday, Ron J. It is a fine day. So we are going to shift over to locals. Like I said, we have a little bit more to talk about, I think, on that memo, and you might be interested in that.
what?
Well, might be interested. So we'll see you guys momentarily.